Number one is that scheduling as a profession is about the movement of a social science into more of a hard science. Number two is even though you're trying to make it a hard science, it's still a social science, which means it's still about people and interactions. And number three is don't compound problems. Now, a lot of people that I've met think that thinking is about intelligence, whereas thinking is a skill. So it's how do you take knowledge that you have, recall it, and how do you, using your conscious part of your mind, structure that so you know what actions to take next or what opinions to have.
People want to follow someone who has vision. Some people want to follow someone who has a mission. They don't want to follow just the person who's we're going to follow these processes and blah, blah. It's not exciting for them. And so that's another one, I think, as a manager framework that you probably want to keep in your mind is where is the ship going? And then being able to kind of feed that in a team in an appropriate manner. Super huge skill and something to think about. What would it look like if this were easy? That's a great question to ask on hard problems. Like we just took it, put it in the garbage can, and I restarted. And I viewed it through the framework of if this were easy, what would it look like? And then you map it out. You often find a lot of solutions or different approaches in that sort of manner. So that's a great framework to go through. Hi, folks. A quick one before we dive into this week's episode. Our book, The Critical Path Career, How to Advance in Construction Planning and Scheduling, is out now, and you can order it on Amazon. We'll include a link below. This is a great way to show support for the Beyond Deadlines podcast, and Greg and I have worked extremely hard taking everything we know in our 30 years of experience, plus everything we've picked up from shooting this podcast, and we've tried to pack it into an information-dense book that you can use right away. In the book, we have specific strategies on how to get a raise, how to get a promotion, and find a new job. We include 26 of the best interview questions that we have come across, in addition to 34 specific impact ideas that you can go use on your projects today. We want to thank everyone who's shown us support so far and enjoy this week's episode. Welcome to the Beyond Deadlines podcast, where we tackle challenges that planning and schedule leaders come across on a day-to-day basis. My name is Micah Piippo, and I'm a planning and scheduling manager.
And I'm Greg Lawton. I'm the CEO of an AI schedule management company called Nodes and Links.
On this episode, we're going to dive into schedule management, and specifically how to think as a schedule manager. What are some of the critical processes you need to keep in your mind? How do you interact with people? How do you manage up? How do you manage across? Greg, do you want to kick us off?
Absolutely. So we were thinking about this episode just before because this week I've been doing performance reviews for my team. We're in December and it's that time of the year where we need to reflect back. And one of the topics I've been talking about with my senior team is deepening their ability to think. Now, a lot of people that I've met think that thinking is about intelligence, whereas actually it's not. Thinking is a skill. So it's how do you take knowledge that you have, recall it, and how do you, using your conscious part of your mind, structure that so you know what actions to take next or what opinions to have. Now, yes, there is a large amount of that is innate, but I don't want to say what age we are, but by the time you're our age, it is definitely a learnt skill, and you can tell that because we're not having tantrums like toddlers and murdering people. There's actually consideration behind what we do. Unless you're Micah and have two Hershey's bars before bed.
I still have tantrums. Yeah, I can say that. Yeah, anyways. Okay. No, I like that. I like that setup. I guess my first thought process is, frameworks, because a lot of, in my opinion, thinking comes down to frameworks. What frameworks are you viewing the world through? Most situations, how you feel about the situation is viewed through what framework you're looking through. So, for example, if you don't get that promotion you're looking for at work, that it can be looked at as a growing opportunity, or that can send you off into a spiral of depression and self-doubt and blah, 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 right? And so what sort of frameworks do you think a schedule manager is using?
It's what have I, in my experience, found to be the most beneficial? And there's lots of these, and we can fill lots and lots of episodes. Just off the top of my mind, just kind of let's start really high level with three biggies where you can't really deny them. Number one is that scheduling as a profession is about the movement of a social science into more of a hard science. And I'll dive down and explain what that means. Number two is that even though you're trying to make it a hard science, it's still a social science, which means it's still about people and interactions. And number three is don't compound problems. So I'll say with number one.
I thought Mr. Math here. Mr. Math is going to come over here and tell me that scheduling's not all about people. All right. Okay.
No, scheduling is about people. You know it.
Your new name is Mr. Math.
I want you to imagine a line in your head, and the line goes from hard science all the way to social science. And by the way, this is actually how schools and universities are actually segmented. So a hard science, I don't know who came up with hard and soft, but essentially a hard science is pure naturalism, which is I measure things in the world, multiple people measure things. If we measure the same thing, it's probably true.
The
so
activity is 10 days because I'm installing one thing per day and I have 10 things.
Exactly. Or more extreme, like I'm a physicist, a more extreme one is water boils at this energy level. Not temperature, because you can have different temperatures, that's a perspective. But this energy level is just one add one.
See, folks,
this number line equals 2.
That's why I called them Mr. Math.
Yep. And then on the other end is the social sciences. And the social sciences are more concerned with emergent effects. So it's the interaction of animals or ecosystems or actually elements of geography like herd migration and biology and things like that fit into there. But so does psychology and actually business schools. So MBAs are actually part of the social sciences. All this generally means is a project is a bunch of people deciding to do something. And the something that they decide to do is different in everyone's head because no two people share the exact same thoughts. So there's uncertainty there anyway. And generally, the whole definition of a project is it's a unique endeavor. So you don't do thousands of projects that are exactly the same and repeat. Well, if you did, it's called a manufacturing line. So you've got this small number, people think differently about the world approach, and you have to make a schedule out of that. So creating schedules is an inherently social process. You have to talk to people, you have to talk to the procurement managers, the contract managers, the customers, the senior leadership, the engineers, the superintendents. And essentially, it's a form of articulation. So you're helping people articulate what's in their head or realize something better than they could on their own. But then there comes a line. And the line goes then into, okay, if this is what we've agreed, none of maths works unless we assume that that's true. So you can't do a critical path analysis if you don't believe that the schedule is in any way correct. You can't start measuring the length of something if you can't agree what the length of a day is or the length of an hour is. So you have to just assume things are correct at some point, and then you have to do your maths. So actually, number 2 is it's social science. Number 1 was you're trying to move into the hard science. So once you get agreement, then you can do the analysis. Don't try and analyze before you've got agreement unless you're trying to use the analysis to get agreement. And then the third component, you'll have to remind me now, Micah, what was the third component?
You think I know Mr. Math? I don't have to we'll have to rewind back the clock.
We'll have to rewind back the clock on that. Both of us have had a night of children.
Dude, here's the problem. If you give such long explanations, it's going to be hard for me to remember what your third point was, you know? And I had too much chocolate cake last night, so a little bit foggy. I don't. But where we can go with this, I guess for me, I think you covered a really, really good overview of how someone should approach scheduling. But I guess where I was left hungry is then there's 2 words to this episode, scheduling manager. So To me, what you're covering covers the scheduling philosophy, but not necessarily hitting potentially the manager philosophy. I think it gives them that base as a scheduling manager. And now now you're throwing in other people and trying to manage a high functioning team.
So actually, this is where I was going to flip it around. I have remembered the third, which is don't compound problems. And the whole thing of
That's
that
right.
is don't
That's
try
right.
and get social agreement and do maths at the same time. And don't try and do maths to get social agreement generally. It doesn't work. But you're right. Those are just three big principles I wanted to approach. But actually, I wanted to flip it around on you and go, cool. If we agree that those principles are there, let's say that you're a senior manager in charge of 10 people and you're in the schedule creation phase of a project. What are 1 to 3 principles that you think are very critical about how you should think about approaching that problem?
Am I an owner or a contractor?
And
What am I?
let's say you're a contractor.
Okay. And I'm just building kind of just a standard schedule baseline for an owner.
Yeah. Let's say
Yeah.
everyone's data centers nowadays. Let's say that you're building a data center. The schedule for a data center for a GC that's selling to an owner.
Yeah, for sure. The first thing is, and it's cool because how you laid out your continuum is how I'd honestly approach the situation. So where's the contract at and what are the minimum requirements of the schedule we need to build? Because you could go out and build the best schedule in the world, but if you forget the owner's milestones, their WBS and coding structure, it didn't serve the purpose that you're actually being paid to make. And so to me, first off, what is the kind of basic level of schedule we're going to create? What are the things that we need to be included? Because no one else is going to understand those but the schedulers. Like your project manager is not going to understand like, oh, the third level of the WBS, or like, I need to add electrical trade coding into it. The second one for me is how are we going to capture this scope in a level and a sizability that makes sense. I don't know if sizability is a word, but I think too often people immediately jump into the like, let's have the planning workshop. I got the owner's requirements. Let's have a planning workshop. But there really needs to be some really deep thought on like what level of detail you're going to go down to, because that's going to direct the engineering team, the procurement team, the construction team, the commissioning team of like, this is where you stop. And maybe this is where that L5 schedule or the whole planning schedule, the production management schedule, or the more detailed schedule will take over. Or is it going to go all the way down to that detail? Because if that point, it's a slippery slope. And then the last one, when I start looking at the collaboration side, it's like, how can I'm looking at this from a like a sports type angle of how can I match the right people with the right groups to be most successful. And so that's kind of a little bit of social engineering to me. Is like, let's say I have 3 or 4 schedulers. I want to pair the right scheduler with the right group to maximize not only the scheduler's skill sets, but also the people that they're working with. Because I think if you can pair the right people together, it makes schedule building so much easier. And so I think those are the 3 things. And the fourth one, a bonus one, is, I'm going to have lots of powwows with my team leading up to this. If I'm the scheduling manager with my planners and schedulers, to really get them dialed in on what we're trying to achieve. I want to make sure we have great alignment. I want to make sure, first and foremost, that they feel confident in what they're about to go do, that they have a good sense of trust, and I have trust in them to go execute this so they feel great when they go out there, and then that they're clear on the goals that we're about to go achieve. If you can kind of get that going early as your team, then they can go out there and act as your boots on the ground level helpers. And so those would be the 3, and the bonus fourth one that I would probably push.
There's one thing that came to mind there, which is what about integration? Because let's say you've got 10 people, you've teamed them up really well, you've really got them driven the mission, they've gone away, they've kind of pulled up, and then you get 10 schedules. And it's like, okay, well, how does
That's
that
kind of
work?
what I was mentioning with the getting the team together and aligned together, and so I think first and foremost, when you're getting a team together, I don't think of it as like, we're going to have a team meeting, I'm going to tell you to integrate the schedules. I'm talking about like, we're going to go golfing, we're going to go play some, go to a video game arcade, we're going to go to a dinner. We're going to get to know each other, because if you're going to integrate a schedule together, that's like, moving on your example of the social sciences, that's like merging 2 people's social sciences. People schedule in slightly different ways. They think about it slightly differently. But if you get people together and have them talking about it, then Kevin talks to Sally. And then when it comes time to tie design and procurement together, Kevin and Sally already buds. And so they can just rock through it. So I think socially getting that team together and getting them functioning as a unit, super important. The second piece then is, as I was mentioning, when we're having those alignment sessions, I'm already talking about integrations between the schedules, and that's part of the level of detail. If Kevin builds his detail way out and Sally keeps it high level, that could really be an issue down the road. So what I'm looking for there is just really dialing in the team of like, this is where we're going with this. These are examples of what's successful. This is the level you go to. You're going to get pushback, from Ron, the engineering manager, who wants to go down to every single piece of paper. Don't do it. Don't go there, right? Keep it this level. Make sure you build the schedule this way. And so I think that's why those team meetings are really important. Too often I just see, scheduling teams kind of thrown to the wolves and they just try and go support customers. And then they end up, in very different places, and that integration's tough. So to me, getting the schedulers to know each other and then really aligning on where you're going and your mission and your team meetings are two the key things that I would drive.
I've got this general principle as well, which is leopards don't change their spots, or people don't change at their absolute core. People's perceptions and people's behaviors can change, but people at that absolute core don't change. And I was just kind of thinking there that you and I both very, very much enjoy our careers and the jobs we're doing. I have always been a massive geek. I like drones. I like computers. I'm literally writing a book about the physics of project. I did physics, and I make software to do analytics. And I have to say, I can do the softer parts and I can do the social parts, but they come much more difficult to me. Not that I can't sit there and interact, but I just won't think off the top of my head, okay, well, I need to get these people interacting and working together. I'm thinking, well, this is the process that needs to go through. And I'm not saying that you're the opposite, but
you must follow process.
you and I have chatted for many years. We've been friends for years. And what I've noticed is that you are much more natural at that than I am. That will be where your mind goes. So one of the things making me think here is that you've got to think about the personalities in your team as well.
I would say going even back a step, you got to think about your own personalities and styles.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like if you're like, let's just take us as extremes, right? And put each other in boxes. Like hypothetically, if you're like me, I need to be thinking more about how I'm going to supplement the type of approach you would take, right? Let's say, just for simplicity, you're more of like a process and like strategy type of person, and this is how it goes. And then if I'm you, I need to be thinking more about the softer, like how do I get people to integrate and gel better? Because if you don't think about how you're going to go approach your team, then going forward even faster than that and trying to figure out how they're going to approach it kind of ends up probably in a bit of a quagmire. So maybe address yourself first as a scheduling manager. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And you can get feedback on those by asking people, or even if you just think about it for a little bit where you ran into trouble. And then by addressing those strengths and weaknesses, and either by calling them out directly and saying, hey, team, you know what? I'm just not great at the social side of things. I need help. People will be able to step in and support you. And then going out and kind of adjusting that. I think to me, I found that really successful because people are always willing to help out.
That's true. That's very true, actually. I've always found that if you're really authentic with who you are, like if you're in a schedule management position or a senior management position, generally, and people listening to this might smile, but generally you're there because you deserve it. Because you've got some kind of skill set which enables you to be the best candidate for that position. But that doesn't mean that you're the perfect manager in the world. And to be honest, I don't think there is a perfect manager in the world. And it's one of these where, to your point, I've actually done 360 feedback for all my team, but I've actually asked to do 360 feedback on myself. And what my team has come back to me on is actually very, very interesting. 80% of the things I very much knew, but could action better. And actually 20% of the things I didn't know. But they're absolutely spot on with what they said. So I'm like, okay, that's actually really interesting. So maybe I'm thinking here, just one principle as how to think as a schedule manager is you actually, if you're the manager part implies you have a team, and you actually have to think about your own personality and your own skill sets first. And then you have to think about the personality and the skill sets of your team and how those are going to gel. Because you can't be a manager if you've got no one to manage. I guess that's
true.
The second half of the equation.
There are lots of scheduling manager titles where you're a manager of the schedule. It's not a management position.
Yeah, that's true. But if that's true, go see part A of this episode where I'm rambling on about naturalism and hard
I
and
feel
soft
bad. I'd
sciences.
say it's for all the jobs I've had and all of the countless hours I spent on LinkedIn looking at jobs. It's like scheduling manager. And then you go down, it's like, this is not a management position. I'm like, you could have just, fixed the title of that. One other one that you brought up, I mean, as we're kind of going through that, is the acceptance of feedback and the action on feedback as a scheduling manager. Super, super important. One that we didn't also talk about that I think is on my mind is that as a scheduling manager, you're thinking about what's going on now and you're handling the now, but you also have a nice foot into where the puck is going into the future. That's some of the best scheduling managers I've worked for have that kind of nice balance, at a personal level. So where their team is at and where they're growing and developing, but also like what's the vision and strategy going to kind of look like for 2025, 2026, 2027, as they start looking out years into the future, where do they see this operation going? And that way they can start putting down, those small pebbles and breadcrumbs and start laying the framework and the foundation to move forward in the future. That's an older camera, so it only has God, now it's crooked now. It only has a 30-minute limit. It has a 30-minute limit on the time view, and so great, here we go.
Right.
All right, all that's perfect. All right, we'll get it done.
So this was more of a little bit of a wandering episode, but the whole process of thinking is about wandering. I definitely think that if people enjoy this, let us know. Mike and I can actually sit down and we can put our thoughts down really robustly and then come at this with a much more structured process. But I'd also love to hear, following the theme of getting feedback, I'd also love to hear what the listener of this think are the core principles of thinking about being a scheduler or a scheduling manager. So if you have those thoughts, just drop a comment under wherever you're listening to this, or drop us a message on LinkedIn, and we'll review them and give a shout out to the best ones.
Absolutely. So for us, from Beyond Deadlines, we hope you have a great week, and we'll see you on the next one. Because people want to follow someone who has vision. Some people want to follow someone who has a mission. They don't want to follow just the person who's we're going to follow these processes and blah, blah. It's not exciting for them. And so that's another one, I think, as a manager framework that you probably want to keep in your mind is where is the ship going? And then being able to kind of feed that in a team in an appropriate manner. Super huge skill and something to think about.
Do you know what? I'll build on that. And because uncharacteristically, I'm going to give tactics that schedule managers can use straight away, as the title suggests, rather than esoteric thoughts about philosophy. So one of my friends is a neuroscientist at University College London, and just did the PhD in child development and creativity and learning, and then how that translates into work and job success and all of these things. But actually, one of the things that she's recently written about is some of the most successful managers actually make time for playful creativity. Now, people have said this to me in the past, as in, okay, my Friday mornings are my explore time, and it's not my I finish my email times. It's I'm going to sit down with a blank sheet of paper and just think. Like, I'm going to have no distractions, headphones on. I'm just going to think about something and think about my team, think about the project, think about the company I'm in, think about my career, think about something. And I've been doing that for a while, and I find that the most useful time of the week, actually, because come Monday morning, I'll be able to articulate something a little better, or I'll have an action on my list that's different than if I didn't do that. So I'd say, it's very difficult on a lot of projects, but definitely make time to sit down with no distractions and think.
That is and you'll start carving out that skill too. That ability to think that we brought up earlier on in the episode, practicing it. I have structured times where I sit down and bring up a problem, or sometimes I like to just I call it throw everything away. You just put everything in the garbage can, whatever. It's like a scheduled progress update. I'm going to put the entire thing in the garbage can and I'm going to start fresh. And what would it look like if I started fresh? Or what would it look like if this were easy? That's a great question to ask on hard problems. Like, we just took it, put it in the garbage can, and I restarted. And I viewed it through the framework of if this were easy, what would it look like? And then you map it out. you often find a lot of solutions or different approaches in that sort of manner. So I would highly agree. That's a great framework to go through.
Another one is, so I really like this. We could do an episode on trigger thoughts if people really like. You just mentioned, what would it look like if it was easy? Another one is, how could I make this 10 times better? Not 2 times, 10 times. And you're only allowed to write down 2 things. So you can't write a comprehensive list of 16,000. It's 2 things. So how about I fly out once a month and just sit with them and go, what are your biggest concerns? And I develop a relationship. These kinds of things. So
Cool.
so this was more of a little bit of a wandering episode, but the whole process of thinking is about wandering. I definitely think that if people enjoy this, let us know. Micah and I can actually sit down and we can put our thoughts down really robustly and then come at this with a much more structured process. But I'd also love to hear what the listener of this think are the core principles of thinking about being a scheduler or a scheduling manager. So if you have those thoughts, just drop a comment under wherever you're listening to this, or drop us a message on LinkedIn, and we'll review them and give a shout out to the best ones.
Absolutely. So for us, from Beyond Bet Deadlines, we hope you have a great week, and we'll see you on the next one.